In case you don't know it, there are a few tax increases on this fall's ballot, including a massive income and property tax increase. Well, the income tax is there. Something gets a tax decrease. This is so confusing. So, from Larimer County, the county assessor, Steve Miller, thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right, you wrote something for Complete Colorado that is causing a bit of a stir of one of the unintended, I ask with a question mark, consequences of what this tax will do. Again, this is moves our income tax to a progressive income tax to raise money for education, but it also messes around with property taxes and gives more property tax money to schools. How does that work? And try to explain it, because I get lost.
Okay. Well, you're right on the income tax. They added four rates above the base 4.63%. Colorado's been 4.63% forever. So they added four income rates above that, tops out at 8.25. That's for individual filers. And then they increased the corporate tax rate to 6%, which equals about a 30% increase in corporate taxes. Now the theory is everybody pays the 4.63%, and that goes to the general fund, where it always went, you know. But it's the increment of the four individual steps, the new steps, you know, that incremental tax, and the incremental tax on corporations that goes into this special fund.
For education.
Only for education.
Right.
And it's exempt from all Tabor limits. Okay. And that's not unusual. You know, somebody wants a new tax, they want it exempt from Tabor.
Because they don't want to refund any of it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it goes without saying. I mean, who wouldn't?
Bring that to what goes on with, as an assessor. As an assessor, you don't care about income taxes. You assess property taxes.
Right. Right. Yeah, and as far as assessors go, and I think I speak for most assessors, of which you're right, there are 64, and I was happy you knew that. It coincides with the number of counties, but you know, wasn't. But it's actually the property tax thing that is a concern, because the 1.6 billion, okay, that's the income tax increase.
Right.
Okay, per year. And I think if the drafters of Amendment 73 had stopped there, they would have been okay. I mean, it may have failed, because that's a big ask.
Right. But they waded into the property assessments world, which is confusing enough. What is it that they do on property taxes with Amendment 73?
I can tell you what they tried to do. And in the Legislative Council's fiscal impact statement, even the Legislative Council says these new assessment rates in now Amendment 73, used to be Initiative 93, don't affect anybody else. It only affects school district mill levies. They said that in the fiscal impact statement, and then that statement was picked up in the literature, you know, supporting. So you know, it's been out there for a long time that this doesn't affect anybody else.
What do you think really happens, though? You're just trying to sound an alarm that there's something going on here with property taxes. Okay. Not plainly obvious.
All right. They did the big ask in income tax. Okay. Then they kind of fiddled around a little and said, you know what we should do? We ought to give farmers and all these other people a little tax break. So the assessment rate in Gallagher on non-residential property, which is basically everywhere nobody lives, you know, commercial, industrial, agricultural, mines, oil and gas, all that stuff, vacant land, tents don't count, is 29%.
29% of what? The assessed value?
The actual value.
Oh, the actual value.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. You see, it goes actual value, the value of your house. You live in Boulder, it's $1 million minimum, right?
I wish.
Yeah.
All right, walk this through me. So I have a house that's worth $1 million,
okay.
I wish, and it's a house. I live there.
Right.
So you as an assessor look at it and go, it's worth $1 million. Then what happens?
Well, then we apply whatever assessment rate the legislature passes. It's currently 7.2%.
All right, so out of $1 million, you take 7.2% of that. So what is that, 72 grand? Am I getting my math right? And what do you do with 72 grand?
That is your assessed value.
All right.
So the million is called your actual value.
Right.
The 72,000 is called your assessed value. And that's what the mill levy is applied to, the assessed value.
The mill levy is like, let's call it the sales tax, if you will. So you take that assessed value and you multiply it by the mill levy. Okay.
And the mill levy is made up of a bunch of different individual levies. It's the school and the city and the county.
What people don't quite get is that let's switch my property from being a house to it's a farmland. All right, it's a shopping mall.
Okay,
right.
that's
so
better.
It's a shopping mall. It's still worth $1 million.
Right.
Instead of multiplying it by 7.2%. It gets multiplied by
29%.
29%.
That's right.
Instead of the assessed value being 72 grand, it's now almost 300 grand. It's $290,000.
That's exactly
And then
right.
you multiply that. So the Gallagher Amendment, which does this, is meant to make commercial property pay a lot more in property tax. So it makes it feel like that residential doesn't pay as much.
That's
correct?
right. That's right.
All right.
Now, when Gallagher passed in 1982, it set the non-residential assessment rate at 29%. That was then in 1982, and that's true today. They set the residential assessment rate at 21%, and so over the years, it's dropped to 7.2%, and that's because of the economic theories behind or under Gallagher.
It says that out of the total amount of money, commercial has to bring in 55%.
Exactly.
Residential has to bring in 45%. So instead of moving this one up and this one down, this one only goes down. Is that right? So residential has gone down. All right, bring it to 72 though. What does 73 do to property taxes?
Well, they dropped the assessment rate, and this is only for school levies. And school levies make up about half of all the property tax paid in Colorado.
Okay.
So just easy to think of that way. So they assess non-residential properties at 24%, not 29%.
It sounds like a tax break to me.
It does, doesn't it? So, and in that, as long as you stay away from their income taxes, you're okay. Just don't let April 15th sneak up on you. And so that's where they want to give a little break to the farmers and, the store owners.
The guys who are writing this tax increase go, listen,
Yeah.
farmers are going to be in the higher income bracket just by nature, but they're farmers. We've got to be nice to them. We're going to lower the assessment rate for their commercial property.
Yeah.
What's your problem with that?
Well, they're doing it because I think of what they did in income tax, but they are also dropping and freezing the residential rate at 7%. Okay. Now, initially, the drafters and legislative council and a lot of people said it doesn't affect anybody else. Well, if you've been around assessment for a while, you kind of know how some of these things work. And that 45-55 thing you just mentioned is actually the key to Gallagher.
Right. That is the Gallagher Amendment. Commercial properties, you all going to add it up together, you're going to pay 55% of all property taxes.
Statewide.
And residential guys, because of that, you're going to pay 45%. You're going to be paying less. By the way, from an economic theory, it hides taxes. And we're still paying those every time we go to a grocery store. We're paying more in products and services to pay for it. But it makes us feel better.
It does. It does.
All right. So under 73, it says for residential or for commercial, we're going to lower that assessment rate. So you're going to make a little less money or pay a little less money.
However, if you look at assessed values, in order to get to that 55-45 split, that goes from actual values to assessed values. So you have the actual value of everything that's not residential, and you multiply that by 29%, so you get this much assessed value. Now you have this much more, this bigger number, that's all the residential value. And so the Division of Property Tax and whoever else is involved in doing this, a lot of people play around with it, they have to figure out what is that number that makes this equal to 45% of the total. And that's how the last one was 7.2. It was stuck at 7.96 for a long time. What Amendment 75 does, they have a notwithstanding clause. And those are always trouble, you know. Notwithstanding anything mentioned above, we're going to set the non-residential assessment ratio at whatever, 24.
Right.
Well, it doesn't get them out of the 45-55 calculation. So what in effect you do, you actually end up assessing all non-residential property at 26.5%. I mean, that's the blended rate.
Right.
That actually drops that total value by 8.6%, which means now you have to lower the assessed value on residential by 8.6%. It's proportional.
Right. We've only got a minute left.
Okay.
The bottom line of this is, should Amendment 73 pass, who's going to get hurt on the property tax side?
Well, interestingly enough, it's going to be everybody who's not a school district, because it's the counties and the cities and the fire districts and library districts and health districts whose rate is actually going to fall farther than it would without the artificially inflated 7%.
All right, 30 seconds left. Let me see if I can encapsulate this. Because of the intricacies of Tabor,
right.
That Gallagher, excuse me. When we pay our property taxes, half of that is really for the school district.
Right.
The school district is going to be just fine should 73 pass.
Okay. Yeah.
All that stuff. But all the other governments that take property tax, our fire, our water,
Right.
our county, maybe our city.
Exactly.
They're going to get hurt.
Exactly.
I think when people start talking about that, they're going to have to figure out if that's the case or not.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you for everything you do. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Listen for me on KHOW Radio. Read me in the Denver Post. Tell a friend about the Independence Institute, independenceinstitute.org. We'll see you next week.